true capitalism is destruction. Schumpeter's law, something like that. The Fed should have let those guys fail, but they kept them afloat. Okay. So what happens is Japan sells it to Sony or a Toyota. The dollars go into Japan. It becomes hot money. Because the system, he thought, Snyder talks about the banking system. They can't leave that money sitting there. So what Japan did was they lend it out. The dollar must be lent out. And it blew Japan into this biggest bubble ever, which came down in 1989. So that's why Duncan is my friend. So he and I talk about that all the time. So the same thing happened in euro. It's called the euro dollar. So the euro dollar is much like the Japanese dollar in some ways. Okay. It's not as confusing as shit, but there's a whole nother system of banking outside the Fed. So the Japanese have one. And so this is the diagram I drew of it. It's really simple. Here you have the Fed, and everybody watches the Fed. But this here is a shadow banking system. And it's every time my dollars go anywhere, it has to be, somebody has to borrow it, or it dies. So what he was saying is this has more power than the Fed. You guys understand that? Yes. And everybody thinks this guy has the power. He has no power. He's a joke. You know, I wrote about him, I call him the Wizard of Oz. He has no power.
Can we talk about that for a little bit? Because this kind of blew my mind. He said that the Eurodollar system absorbed the role of the reserve currency before Nixon took us off the gold standard. He's saying that this Eurodollar shadow system has been running things for 50 years.
Yes.
50 years.
That's Japan.
This kind of just blew me away. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I've heard of this shadow banking system and all of this, but I didn't realize how much power they had. I mean, the Fed is just, the one thing I took away from the Fed is he talks about expectations management policy. Expectation. They're doing printing money because they want to trick the people to thinking that it's going to lead to inflation. We're going to print all this money, so everybody's operating as if there's going to be inflation, and they're acting on that. It's all, as you said, it's a shell game.
It's management of expectations, right?
Yes, they're doing it on purpose. They want us to think this way.
And then CNBC gets up there and they say, "Oh, Powell's going to offer us forward guidance. Don't fight the Fed." You know, that's why I'm not in the stock market.
So I just didn't realize how little power the Fed has. The Fed really has no power.
None.
And we all think it does. That's the lie.
That's why I wrote that the Fed chairman is the Wizard of Oz. Anything else, Kim, on that? I mean, it's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Oh, it blew me away. The Eurodollar system absorbed the role of the Bretton Woods system as the Bretton Woods system failed. So it failed, and as it was unable to circumvent Griffin's paradox. I'm not sure I forget what Griffin's paradox is.
Griffin's dilemma. Griffin's dilemma is this: whoever is the reserve currency will always run a deficit. In other words, they'll never get ahead. So that's what happened when Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. Griffin's dilemma was already in place. And every time they made money, it created more debt. It just created more fake money. And America got poor. The deficit kept going up because they had to have that toing and froing. Griffin's dilemma, plus Schumpeter, which is that capitalism is destructive. Okay, go ahead, Kim.
He said So he said long before Nixon took us off the gold standard, it had already, the euro dollar shadow system had already become the global reserve currency.
Do you know why that is?
No.
It's called the fractional reserve system. Okay, so for the system, for the banking, so the banking system's broken. Do you hear that?
Yes.
So
Yeah,
when we put money in the bank, in theory, so I put $1 in, if the fractional reserve is 10, they're going to print $10. If they don't print those $10, the banks go bust. They need somebody to step up to borrow those $10.
But how does that make the euro dollar system the global reserve currency? Everybody thinks the US dollar is the global reserve currency, and he's saying it's not. He's saying it's the euro dollar system.
It has more power than the Fed. Now, please understand, what simply happened in Japan, except this was in Europe, where they have multiple currencies and different, the Deutsche Bank, Bank of England, and all this stuff. It's flawed in the banking system. It's called the fractional reserve system. So if I drop $1 in the bank can lend out 10. Now, what happens if nobody borrows that 10? Banks go bust. So they had to, as the dollar went in, it went outside, it went into Europe and into Japan, and everybody who goes is toxic. So it goes in, they have to print 10 more, and 10 more, and 10 more. And that's what I was talking about, the collateral. Question is, what are you lending money on? So credit cards have been great, 18%, and student loans have been great. And that's what I was talking about, the collateral is fungible. It's bullshit. Kind of interesting, huh?
He said the only panic was the banks panicking in their interbanking market. That's what the panic was. There wasn't a crisis.
They were all out of money and their collateral's going bad. That's what Lacey Hunt called broken glass. These commercial buildings are going down. That's broken glass. It's called asset versus liability. So for that office building to be an asset, you have to have a tenant in there. And when the vacancies are so high, that one-time asset, the security, which is the office building, is coming down. Because what Kim, Kenny, and I do, our asset is the tenant. They provide the cash in that makes our apartment house work. But in office buildings and shopping centers right now, the tenant is gone. So that's what Lace was calling broken glass. Meanwhile, the Fed is sending out expectations. There's going to be inflation so that we keep spending. And we didn't spend fast enough, then they have to send money straight into the system. QE is bank reserves. And that stuff, what were they pumping out? Stimmy checks. They had to get the money into the economy so we would spend. This is the Fed. All they have is QE. It doesn't work. That's why he says Japan is now on 24 or 25. And he says, you should ask yourself, why isn't it working? And his answer was because the banking system is broken. The banking system is based upon fractional reserves. So if $1 comes in, they've got to lend out 10. So these guys have been lending out 10 times 10 times 10, and now the collateral's going bad. So that's why what Snyder was saying, all the Fed could say was unemployment's going down. I mean, unemployment, whatever it is. So because there's unemployment, the economy is getting better. And that's why he raised interest rates, and Trump went nuts saying, hey, the economy is not strong. And that's why they're attacking Trump. That's my opinion, because the guys who run the banking system and the school system, who we're going after, run the show. The swamp. So this, he said the banking system is bad. So these guys here are collapsing because their collateral is going bad. The assets they funded, which Lazy Hunt calls broken glass. That's like if you walk in, you say, I have a job, I'm making this much and this much, the bank will lend you money. But the day you lose your job, the bank doesn't want to talk to you. They want to start collecting. Have you walked some of these smaller shopping centers lately? They're empty. So it hasn't yet shown up as a liability. That's what Hunt was talking about. GDP does not measure broken glass. I was up, I took my watch in for repairs. Anyway, up north, fucking shopping center's empty. So I hear broken glass. So you look at the balance sheet. For there to be an asset, for there to be a liability, there has to be an asset. So the collateral is the asset, or the assets are going bad. But they don't measure it, according to Lacy Hunt, they don't measure it in GDP. So they keep printing M2, but it's bank reserves, it's not cash. So stimulus checks is UBI, universal basic income, going straight in. The problem is the assets are collapsing. The whole thing is coming down like a house of cards. That's why we're heading into a depression.
He says that when they print money, it's the belief that this will cause inflation. So we're all believing it's going to cause inflation. And so we act as if it's going to cause inflation, and then it causes inflation.
So let me just go back to Rich Dad Poor Dad 25 years ago. Rich don't work for money. Your house is not an asset. Savers are losers. And the Fed is a little wizard who can't do anything. And the power is what Snyder is saying. This is the banking system out here. The whole system is based upon, if a dollar comes in, they've got to lend it out. And the collateral's going bad now. So that's why he says it's going to be deflation, not inflation. But the Fed has got to keep the illusion that there's inflation. The reason China is important is because Xi Jinping, Xi just said, we're not going to play that game. We're going to destroy the companies that are not viable. Whereas in the West, they prop them up. So that's why when I read Bunch of Giants in '83, and then I was in Borders one day, and it was Duncan's book, The Dollar Crisis, that the pieces start to come together. Savers are losers. The rich don't work for money. Your house is not an asset. And what's happening is the collateral, which is the asset, is going bad because money doesn't exist anymore. It's all fiat, it's all fake. The Fed, the money system. Fractional reserve, when a dollar comes in, it must be lent out 10 times. But the collateral that they base that, so they have to produce as collateral to lend it out. Because it's not money, it's bank reserves. And the reason we have a fast track and the reason we have the financial statement, it's they only allow access into that via financial statement. So when I met Kenny 20-something years ago, we understood that. He can take a piece of property and turn it into asset, which is collateral. But the real asset is the tenant. And that's why we always say real estate is based upon jobs. So as jobs collapse, real estate collapses with it because the collateral goes bad. Well, they want you to think expectation is there's going to be inflation. So that's why they say we're printing money when they're printing bank reserve, which is interbank. And they need people like who have like when Kenny goes in, they want to see him because he can actually create an asset, a collateral.
Right.
And when you have a student loan, same thing. You'll punish that student forever. And you got a homeowner, they'll hang on to that house forever. That's why Rich Dad was created. Interesting, huh? Currency is a derivative of money. So the dollar bill is derivative of debt. And that's why I say gold and silver. Did you pick up that thing about Bitcoin? It's not the Bitcoin, it's the technology that's going to take over. Because it's based on trust. So I don't know shit about tech, but I understood the blockchain basically. It's a ledger system. There has to be a balance, money in, money out. There has to be something there. The blockchain is a contract. It promises 21 million coins. That's it. It's based on scarcity. And people are counting on that promise of 21 million.
He said that we're piling into crypto because of this misidea that by continuing to print money, it's going to lead to inflation. So we better buy crypto. So he's saying that the people are piling on based on misinformation and manipulation.
That's why that guy came on. I forgot his name, breedlove or something. It's 1.2 million per coin, per Bitcoin. I didn't buy it. I still don't buy. That's capital gains. It's not, it's a game I don't want to play. But the reason why the cash flow game is you have to have a financial to go in there and borrow. And people don't have strong enough financials. The assets are going bad. Kenny's licking his chops right now because when those assets go bad, he's going to buy. But he's got the financial. That's Rich Dad right there. My banker doesn't ask me for my report card. Is it kind of making sense why this company was formed here?
bao năm tháng qua, nhưng trong trái tim không bao giờ xa. Lời mẹ ru con hiu hiu chưa hè, mùa lụt nước lũ bắt